Good morning, boys and girls. All right, we are continuing with Snow Treasure. Where we left last night, or last time, I should say. The one alleged Polish soldier who was part of the German crew there was missing, and they started looking for him. So let me read the last couple paragraphs before I get to chapter 27. There's no one here but these youngsters, he told the sergeant. There's no use to ask them if they saw anyone, for they won't answer. I think we might as well go back. The sergeant drew up stiffly. Pardon, here, Lieutenant, he said. The commandant comes. All right, chapter 27. Let's see if these guys get busted. Near the cliff, Peter could see the bulky figure of the commandant, the head of the German forces at Ryswick. He was picking his way up the valley. Peter and Lovisa continued playing in the snow. Peter had begun a snowman, and Lovisa was making hers a fancy hat. They wanted to get up and start for home, but they didn't dare move. They felt they would be less noticed if they stayed where they were. The commandant came puffing along. He seemed to have trouble lifting his feet in the deep snow. In his hand, he carried a light little cane, a swagger stick, you might say. He plodded along until he came to the children. When he got there, he stopped in his tracks. If he'd only go on, Peter growled to himself. But he didn't dare look up to see. His hands were busy with the snow. His head was hot, his mouth dry, and there was a buzzing in his ears. What would happen now? What if the commandant found the bricks under the snowmen? Why, there were more than 1,000,000 kroner left, right there at their feet. We're searching for a German infantryman, the commandant announced to the children. Have any of you seen a man in the woods? Of course, there was no answer. He turned aside and whispered a few words to Lieutenant Sit down. Then he spoke to the children in a loud voice. I said, we are looking for an German infantryman. It's very important for you children to tell if you've seen anyone on this part of the coast. There's a severe penalty attached to anyone who has seen him and not reported it. Still, the children said nothing. I have a good mind to give you children a lesson in manners. His voice was angry. When you're spoken to, it's only right that you should answer. Has no one taught you that? Now then, yes or no, have you seen a German infantry soldier in this fjord? Children acted as if they had not heard him. Lovisa sat back on her heels and to admire her handiwork. But Peter, for all he tried to be cool, felt a terrible thumping in his chest. His cheeks must be as red as rowan berries. For if any snowman were to be knocked down, the commandant strode across the snow and stood above Lovisa. Little girl, tell me, did you or did you not see a German infantryman? He screamed in anger. Answer me! Lovisa only turned her big blue eyes up at him, not so much as a nod to she give him. Don't you know I can make you talk? Don't you realize that we Germans can make anyone do our will? We've only to command to be obeyed. Peter remembered the pact that he had made the day that he had started this undertaking. They had sworn on the sword that they would not give information about what they were doing. Of course, this wasn't the same. But even so, they weren't to talk to the Germans for fear they would say something to make them suspicious, but need not worry about Lovisa. Pledge or not, she would not talk. The candidate's eye fell. There was something he didn't like about Lovisa's snowman. Ah, you Norwegians! With his stick, he slashed off the snowman's head. It was as if he would do the same to Lovisa's. Then he raised the stick and cut the snowman deeply in two. The only part rolled inside beside the head. Only the haunches remained. Don't you go, he shouted in his rage. Just the way all people go who stand in our Fuhrer's way, the way Norway goes, and Holland and Belgium and France and England and all the countries that oppose the German will. Lovisa was near to tears, Peter could tell, but she winked them back. Now, little girl, the commandant went on. You see what will happen to all your people if you do not help the good Germans who have come to save from the hardships your country makes you endure. Hardships? Peter had to bite his tongue to keep from saying. It's you who bring the hardships, you with your talk of the good Germans. So, little girl, let this be a lesson, the high officer was still enraged. Unless you want yourself and all who belong to you to go rolling over like that, and that, and that. He began kicking the stump of Lovisa's snowman. The snow flew out in a shower. With each kick, Peter winced, for the commandant's foot could only be a few inches from her 2 bricks. In their haste that day, they had not been able to bury deep, but had to count on the snowman to hide their gold. The high officer, had evidently decided to give Lovisa a thorough lesson, for he lifted his foot for another kick. Like a football player, he stood back to swing at what was left of the snow figure. In another minute, he'll stub his toe against the bricks, Peter thought. Then he gathered a handful of snow. He rolled it into a hard ball. Then he threw. He stood back and took aim. He landed exactly on the commandant's right ear, as Peter meant it should. Then Peter took his heels and ran to the woods. Wow. And that leaves us to chapter 28. So he threw a snowball at this guy. We're going to see how this flies. We will do that next time. All right. Until next time, boys and girls, let's hope they make it through this alive. All right. Take care.